everything is up. So then the Myanmar government ratified the conventions, which they never had before, just so that the insurgencies wouldn't be the first to do it. And when the Myanmar government has always refused a prisoner exchange, but when the two sides signed the conventions, the insurgencies released a certain number of prisoners of the Burmese army that they held, and the Burmese government, or the Myanmar government, did the same. It wasn't an exchange, but both were released. So, problems of Myanmar and Burma are still with us. There are no easy answers. And my last point is that one also has to be thinking in broader conflict resolution terms, the same way as you really can't just deal with human rights violations in Kashmir. The violations in Kashmir are part of a much larger issue of sovereignty, of Indian-Pakistani relations, etc. So one has to work and insist that each human being is important, etc. Therefore, we must look at each individual Kashmiri. But we also have to know that it is part of a long discussion between India and Pakistan. Therefore, it's important to look for opportunities for non-governmental conflict resolution efforts, for discussions. And so I leave that as the point. It's perhaps up to you who are not in Baluchistan or Pakistan to think in terms of what are we already doing and what can we do more in our discussions with the Pakistan government, with people who are influential in Pakistan who are not in the government, etc. Obviously, you know the situation on the ground. I do not. But it is part of a larger question of self-determination, of greater autonomy, of however you see that situation. It is not simply people being disappeared, as was done in Chile for purely domestic reasons. It's part of a larger issue. So I'll stop there, but happy to answer any questions or to come back in, depending on how we end up our afternoon in terms of strategizing and looking at what can be done in the UN system. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think what you've shown us very graphically is the need for us to be at the UN, to be represented at the UN, the need for allies, the need for continuity, the need to work with others, but to be aware of the conflicts that can exist between groups, and to recognize that sometimes even being seen speaking to one of them means there are other guys over here who are potentially very good allies who will never work with you again, and so on. It's a rat's nest in the UN. It's a complete rat's nest, not just among the national delegations, but with the NGOs. And the reason, the need for continuity is very simple. You just need to have people who learn how it's working, how to work with others, how to maximize your own efforts. Thank you very much indeed. Questions for Renee?
Sorry. In your speech you mentioned about the China, which is support Pakistan and some Islamic group, and you was very careful when you mentioned USA and UK. So I didn't get you that they get support from USA and UK as well, or they are just sitting there and watching what happens?
My feeling was what was spoken this morning. The Americans and the British, I think, don't want waves. They've got enough problems with Afghanistan. They don't want a disintegrating Pakistan next door. I think their reasoning is relatively obvious. China, on the other hand, is because I've worked a lot on Tibet, China is the one country where the quality of their diplomats has the most improved. From the late 70s, when the human rights bodies moved to Geneva, to now, when the Chinese first came, they spoke pidgin English. They didn't know how the system really worked. Today, the Chinese are top-notch. They've got good diplomats. They know how the system works, and they have, in fact, taken over everything that deals with Asia. This is their prime. They support Sudan. They do certain things elsewhere. But what they want is that nothing happens dealing with Asia that doesn't pass through them. So plus they've got a large, there are many Chinese, so they've got large delegations. They go and they talk to governments, they talk to NGOs, etc. As I said, I've worked a lot on the Burma issue. The year that Burma got a special rapporteur was because there was no special rapporteur on an Asian country. All the special rapporteurs dealt with either Latin American or Africa. And so people were going around saying, why isn't there a special rapporteur from to look at an Asian country? So that year there were two Asian countries that we were trying to have a spotlight on. One was China and the other was Burma. And the governments decided, we'll take Burma. And Burma had no friends. The Burmese had been so closed in on themselves that even the non-aligned countries weren't going to come to their defense. China has a few friends and many clients. And as a result, there was never been a special rapporteur on China. And since then, the Chinese have gained strength and strength and strength. And the Chinese, I don't want to say control the whole council, no, but they control any issue that looks Asian. And Pakistan is obviously part of Asia. I'll be critical because it's also my nationality. I have never seen a good American diplomat. The one good American diplomat who would have learned was a congressman, was named to the commission in '84, I think. He was learning and then was assassinated by one of his students. He used to teach at Yale, and one of his students who was mad came in and murdered him. Before him and after him, I have never seen a good American diplomat. They've concentrated on Cuba, and that's the only thing that they've done. Maybe people who have other views. But the quality of the British diplomats are much better. But they don't control, and Britain is part of the European Union, and there are efforts to make common European Union policies, which usually end up by being lowest common denominator, so that the European Union occasionally takes courageous stands, but relatively seldom. And so, as I say, I think the British and the Americans are unlikely to act on Pakistan, but they're not the active support that the Chinese are.
Thank you. I said earlier that I think one of the really important things is to have a Baloch presence in the Human Rights Council to learn how it works. I would add something to what René has said regarding the power politics. The Human Rights Council is not a human rights organization. The Human Rights Organization here in Geneva is the Office of the High Commission. The Human Rights Council is a political organization, and there are several power blocks, and the dominant power block in terms of who has most allies is the Organization of the Islamic Conference, led by Pakistan. So you will not make great headway by confronting and head-to-head with Pakistan. One of the reasons that we now have a Human Rights Council and the old Commission for Human Rights was disbanded was because the Commission had become notorious for its politicizing and its selectivity in the issues it would deal with. It was completely dominated by a group of states who called themselves the like-minded group. And what they were like-minded about was that none of them would ever condemn the others in that group for human rights violations. And they were 2/3 of the membership of the Commission. Kofi Annan said, reform is impossible, we've got to start with a clean slate. He created the council, and his dream was it would be a club of nation states committed to the preservation and promotion and protection of human rights. His ideal was watered down in the year of negotiations, so that, for example, one of his ideas was that every state that stood for election to the Council should pledge to move towards improving its human rights record. Even that got thrown out. Now the member states are all elected on a regional basis. We have roughly the same representation from Asia, Africa as we had before, and these people continue to work together, except they don't call themselves the like-minded group anymore. But it means for any issue which is of genuine concern on human rights abuse, whether it's in the Congo, Sudan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, anywhere else, you will not find those governments condemned by the Human Rights Council. What you have to do is two things. You have got to lobby the good guys, the Western liberal democracies, but I would include in that people like Korea, Japan, Australasia and so on, to work towards raising issues, even